Good morning. Hello to everyone and welcome to the first virtual BoucherCon originating out of Sacramento, California. We are so delighted to be with you this morning. My name is Paula Gail Benson. I'm a legislative attorney and short story writer, and I am delighted to be the moderator for this fabulous panel of authors. Our topic is Make Mine Romance, Is There a Love Angle? Just a few housekeeping things. If you will please put any questions that you have for our panelists in the chat line. Our magnificent host, June Gillum, writer, poet, Gorilla Girl, check out our website to find out about that, is going to group together all of your questions. If you have a question for a particular author, if you will make a note about that, and at the end of the session, as we near the end, I will read out the questions and make sure that they get answered for you. Again, thank you so much for being here with us, and we are delighted to have you. Author Eleanor Taylor Bland said, "The most significant contribution that female African-American writers have made collectively to mystery fiction is the development of the extended family, the permanence of spouses and significant others, most of whom don't die within the first 3 chapters, children who are complex, wanted, and loved, and even pets." Today, we're going to talk with our authors about the love elements, including humans, pets, or occupations or obsessions that they have in their mysteries. And I want to start with Julie Hennrikus. Julie, I probably bungled that, I apologize.
Oh, that was perfect.
As your website says, you are one woman, 3 authors, and many books. As Julia Henry, you write the Garden Squad series. As J.A. Hennrikus, you write the Theater Cop series. And as Julianne Holmes, you write the Clock Shop series. What love elements are in your novels?
Well, it's interesting because each one has a different love element, and I think the protagonist and their age also speaks to it. So in my most recent series, the Garden Squad series, which I write as Julia Henry, Lily Jane is a very recent widow who deeply loved her late husband, and both she and her garden, she's a master gardener, are starting to come back to life at the beginning of the series and sort of reconnect. And she does that mostly through the love of her friends, the Garden Squad. So we do have that love element of her late husband. There is a handsome next door neighbor who moves in at the beginning of the series, but I'm writing book 5 now, and they're still very good friends. So nothing is happening fast there.
Very good. Rena Leith, you spent many years in San Francisco, and now you live in New Jersey. Your 2 mystery novels, Myrtle Beach and Coastal Corpse, take place in Northern California, and they involve your protagonist, Cass Peak, with a ghost. What are the love elements in your novels?
Well, Cass, being the primary character, my sleuth, has a relationship beginning in the first book with her ex-college sweetheart. She's recently divorced. So there's a little bit of love-hate going on there. She also has love-hate going on with her cat. And the younger couples, there are 2 of them in the series, both are in relationships. Her younger brother is married, and her 2 partners in her website business are boyfriend, girlfriend.
Fabulous. Camille Minichino. Camille, I don't know how that you have managed all of this. In addition to your PhD in physics and being a writing teacher, you have 5 series: the Periodic Table Mysteries, the Miniature Mysteries, which you wrote as Margaret Grace, the Professor Sophie Knowles Mysteries, which were previously written as Ada Madison, the Postmistress Mysteries, written as Jean Flowers, and the Alaskan Diner Mysteries, written as Elizabeth Logan. Tell us about the love interest in your novels.
Well, I have all that because I'm really old. So, you get time to do all that. And now I'm sitting here on the Golden Gate Bridge, just So every now and then I'll lose a shoulder or something when I move because it's a Zoom background. But anyway, to answer the love interest question, I have a lot of flirting going on in my novels and a lot of subtext, like, do you want to take a ride with me? That kind of subtext. But in the end, I marry off the couple, and that's the end of the series. So marriage ends the series for me. In between, there's all this playfulness, so to speak.
Very interesting, very interesting. S.C. Perkins, you are a fifth generation Texan, and your debut mystery, Murder Once Removed, featuring ancestry tracer Lucy Lancaster, won the 2017 Malice Domestic First Mystery Competition. This year it was nominated for an Agatha as Best First Mystery, and your novel Lineage, Most Lethal, is the second in the series. Tell us about your love elements.
Well, my genealogist main character, Lucy Lancaster, has a love interest in the form of FBI Special Agent Ben Turner. And so that's slowly progressing. And then there's also the love elements between, there is a cat that belongs to her condo manager, and the cat's name is NPH for Neil Patrick House Cat. And there's a love element there. They really, really are, Lucy and the cat are very tight. And then she has, she goes to a diner all the time. It's a taqueria called Big Flacos Tacos. And the taqueria owner is like her second Mexican father. And they're very protective of one another. There's a big love interest, love situation there, platonic, fatherly type love. And then there's the love that comes with all of the genealogy that she does. You know, she's tracing her clients' ancestors in order to, you know, because they love their families and they want to know their past and whatnot. And so there's a lot of different love elements, in my opinion, in my books. And I love it. That's one thing I love about writing cozy mysteries, is that little, the fun and the humor and the love that you can put into them. It's so much fun for me.
Absolutely, absolutely. Dr. Ransdell, you have 25 years experience playing in a mariachi band, and you've written a memoir as well as a mystery series featuring mariachi violinist Andrea Veracruz. In addition, your love of travel has had you write a romance novel, and your romance is set in Thailand. Tell us about the love elements in your books.
You know, authors always kind of write about themselves, you know, so I think what you wind up writing is partially autobiographical. So anyway, so I have this mariachi violinist. In his first book, the boss says, oh, keep an eye on my wife, which is really, really wrong for him, but it does lead him to a woman who would be appropriate. The problem is he's scared to commit. Oh, he doesn't think really in his heart that a relationship can work out. So he chases after Rachel, but so slowly that she keeps running away from him. So he's having a hard time. I think I have also had trouble committing. But anyway, in the beginning of his fifth book, which is the one I'm working on now, his brother says, you know, you ought to marry this one because she understands you. She's also a musician. But of course, it's going to take the whole book for him to be convinced maybe he should maybe propose, but he's not going to be very sure about it.
That sounds fascinating. Faye Snowden, you grew up in a shotgun house in Shreveport, Louisiana. You had a cat named Blue, served in the Navy, have managed one husband, 2 boys, 3 writing fellowships, and 5 dogs. And you've written 3 mystery novels, 2 of them featuring Dr. Kendra Hamilton, and one with your protagonist, Raven Burns, who is a police detective whose father is a serial killer. As well as you've written short stories and poems. Tell us about the love elements in your novels.
Yeah, I'm going to go from the big picture, not necessarily talking about the love elements. But when I first started writing, I actually have 3 romantic suspense books out. I'm starting in '99. And those books, when I wrote them, were kind of like, I just thought that was the kind of book I should be writing. When I was younger, my mom used to read Harlequin romances. So, and then I read a lot of among other things. And I just thought, oh my goodness, it would be so fun to write. So I started, I mean, I was relatively young. And so it's like a lot of sexual tension, and you have these amateur sleuth women falling in love with or trying to fall in love with detectives. But then I raised my boys, and then I took a 10-year hiatus. But when I came back into writing, I found out I was much more interested in killing people than loving them. So Raven Burns is not about, she does not have a love interest, but what she does have is a really tight brotherly, sisterly, soul kind of soulmate relationship with her partner. So that's what her love interest is. So, yeah.
Fascinating, fascinating. And Grace Topping, my blogging partner, Grace calls herself the poster child for never give up. She is also a Navy vet, and after 10 years of writing and 38 revisions, her Staging is Murder, featuring home stager Laura Bishop, was nominated for an Agatha for Best First Novel, and it became a USA Today bestseller. And now your second is already out, I believe?
Came out this year.
Fantastic. Tell us about the love elements in your work.
Well, there's a reason I don't write romance, because I don't think I'd be any good at it. Especially sexual, scenes. I didn't want my family, my mother reading, anything like that. Laura is a widow of a serial cheater. So she is, adverse to men right now, especially good-looking men. She's got this aversion because they've always been responsible for any unhappiness in her life. But I think the love interest in my book is love of family, love of large families. She's taken, from the time she was in second grade, under the wing of her best friend's big Italian-American family that has really gathered around her and given her the love she never had in her own home growing up. So, it's how they come around and support, and that's my background, big Italian families. But it just shows the importance of love and families and the support mechanism. So not a whole lot of romance, although, the detective she deals with, and I didn't want to go into that stereotype of the main character falling in love with the detective, but he keeps suddenly, showing a little interest, and I keep fighting him down, but so far it hasn't worked. So we'll see where it goes.
Well, recently in a writing program, I heard it suggested that two characters who become romantically involved should have mirroring or opposite type of characteristics, which in essence put them in an protagonist-antagonist relationship. And I wanted to ask if you agree. And whenever I ask this question, S.C. Perkins, who I'm going to call Stephanie, but remember her as S.C. Perkins because there's another Stephanie Perkins writer. Stephanie, do you agree that the protagonist-antagonist theory of creating a romantic interest is a good one to follow?
Well, I like it because it creates fun banter, which I love writing. And, and in the beginning, there's always a little bit of butting heads, which is fun and whatnot. And as they sort of circle around each other and sort of feel each other out and whatnot. And I think that is so much fun to write. So I really enjoy it. And I can see why somebody might not want that, but my character is a strong female character, and she, needs someone who can keep up with her. And so to me, it's a lot of fun. And I really like reading about it in other people's books too. I like reading all different types of relationships, but to me, that's a lot of fun.
Camille, I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah, I like Stephanie's idea of what happens when you have that kind of tension. And usually if an amateur sleuth is almost always going to have that with a law enforcement person. They're always going to be at odds. She's going to be meddling and so forth. And he doesn't want her to meddle. And then in the end, of course, they meddle together, whatever. So I do like that idea. And most of the time I use it once in a while. This time the man in the group, so to speak, is a journalist. And so there's a different kind of tension between my sleuth, who is a diner owner and cook in Alaska, by the way. There's a different kind of tension because sometimes he will put out a story before she thinks it should be out, and or she thinks that he scooped her in some way. So it works a little differently, but it's the same idea. Yeah.
Faye, I saw you nodding your head too.
Yeah, it adds ratchets up the tension on the story. But I do have so I like it. I like it when they're opposites. I think that, to me, this is going to be awful. Where's my husband? I don't know. I better close the door so he doesn't hear this. But when you're in especially women, when you get into a relationship, there's a certain amount of freedoms that you give up when you get married or when you partner with anyone. And to me, it's almost like this kind of push-pull, right? Do you want to really give up? Do you really want to, kind of to commit your life to this person? Because it is a commitment. And while the commitment may be, good and you feel good about it, I think there's a part of me, at least, that going, what the heck am I doing? And you say life? You mean life? It's like, but I also think that it depends on the story that you're writing. It has to fit into the story. If you just artificially kind of say, because my writing class professor said this is the best way, and you do it, I think readers sniff that out. They're smart people. So you really have to make sure that it really integrates in with the story and that it actually benefits the story when you're doing stuff like that.
DR, what you talked about the struggle. What about the suspenseful elements in keeping that struggle alive?
Well, right now I have Andy with another musician, but the problem is, and this is what's happened in his very first book, Andy is too nosy. And as a mariachi player, I should explain, you don't usually read music. So you watch people and he notices things, and this always gets him in trouble. So in one book, he follows Rachel to Mexico, but then this woman who was around him disappears, and then he tries to find her. And so she's always reeling him back, and he's always getting involved in things by accident. So that's the push-pull. In the book I'm writing right now, he's trying to teach, he's in a very bad situation because he has to help Rachel put on a show of her songs, but the musicians have to be high school students because of this grant they got, and he's not a teacher. So now he's really in trouble. She's a teacher, but he doesn't have the patience for these kids. So that's why they're at odds right now. She keeps saying, be a little bit nicer. And he's like, but they're terrible.
Julie, what do you think about the idea of suspense and tension building with this opposites attract?
Well, I think that the tension, it's especially if you're writing romantic suspense, that sort of tension is built in. I find that with my own writing, in the love elements that I've had in all my series, I don't build that tension in as much because the romances are usually very slow moving. And also, they've got enough tension in their lives trying to solve the crime or, deal with the dead whoever in their garden. I also find in my current series with Lily Jane is 65 years old. So bantering is just part of her life, and raising tension is her mission because she doesn't care anymore what people think. She's at that age where she's just going to fix it. And so I think that bantering is just part of her, how she moves around the world, and she really doesn't care what people think.
Oh, that's lovely. That's lovely. Grace, tell us about Laura, and is there any of that tension that's built up with this relationship that may be out there?
I think it's natural in a book with an amateur sleuth that you're going to have that tension. They're always bashing heads because she's convinced that whoever's accused of the murder is innocent, and the police officer is convinced that he's got the right person. And so he's telling her to stay out of police affairs. One thing that disturbs her is he's referred to her as Miss Marple, which she finds very insulting. You know, he couldn't have, you know, compared her to Stephanie Plum. I mean, he has to compare her to Miss Marple. So of course she's upset. So the nice thing about books like this is you get to insert a lot of great bantering. You know, as Stephanie said, is that discussion between the two that brings out the tension, you know, and having witty dialogue. I think readers really like that. They like the dialogue between the two. So that's where the tension comes out. You know, he's admonishing her to stay out of it, and she's saying, but you've got the wrong person. You know how it goes.
Rena, how about you? With the tension and antagonist-protagonist relationships between love interests.
Well, in the case of George Ho and Cass Peak, a lot of their tension arises from the fact that she bought her house very cheaply on the California coast because it came with a ghost. And George, a Chinese Hawaiian background, is very, very superstitious. She can't exactly tell him about the ghost because she's beginning to feel interest in him, doesn't want to drive him away. And yet, how do you hide a ghost who can pop in at any minute and who has a very wicked sense of humor?
That is a good question. And Rena, I am seeing a note to please ask you to speak up loudly because they're having a little bit of difficulty hearing you. Rena, I'm going to start with you with this question, please. As I mentioned, Eleanor Taylor Bland pointed out that women writers, and I think cozy writers, have added familial friendship support elements that weren't previously found in hard-boiled or noir kind of stories. How has that increased the themes and the situations that can be explored in mysteries?
I think it adds...
And a little bit louder, Rena.
I think it adds a great many additional themes. For example, you've got, in the case of my books, you have the sexual tension between George and Cass. You also have this bickering that goes on between Jack, Cass's younger brother, his wife, Jillian, and Cass herself, older sister, younger brother. Cass is forming a company with some of the college students who are into programming. She has to find a profession. She got divorced after not having a job for many years. So she's been in search of a way to make money, something that can develop into a profession, and dealing with the people in the small town where she's moved. I think in my case also having an animal in there provides another relationship way to go.
Absolutely. Faye, how about you? And I think that it is so fascinating that one of your protagonists really deals with having a father being the type of person that she's ultimately trying to apprehend. What kind of themes and situations have you found that you can explore more broadly by considering these family elements?
Family relationships, totally, and they've always fascinated me. My father, and then he is not a serial killer, I promise. I don't think so anyway. But my father was also a writer, and as I explain on many podcasts, and I tell my friends, oh, I think I did too much sharing. But you know, they were divorced. You know, I'm a child of divorce, and so I also had parents who were very bitter against each other, and so I lived with my mother, and so of course she would disparage my father. I mean, I thought that man was the devil for quite a number of years. But when I did, and he's a wonderful guy, just complex like we all are. But for a long time, I thought about, you know, am I like him? You know, somebody telling you that someone's a devil, but they're also a part of you. You're thinking, well, like, my goodness, am I the devil? So I kind of, and I think I appreciate it what DR said about you're kind of a little bit autobiographical. So I just kind of wanted to explore, you know, how much of the bad parts of our, you know, mostly wonderful parents are actually passed down to us. Where does this evil come from? And so actually, you know, moving into the, I guess academics would call it the domestic sphere or whatever, the family, you know, moving detective novels that way gave me an opportunity to explore that, but also put the rules around it, so I didn't have to, you know, work too hard. I mean, you have to work hard, but I mean, you know, where, you just have to, you know, have a murder that you have to solve eventually and things like that. And so it's very freeing in a way because it leaves you time to explore those other kind of relationships and theories and things like that.
DR, what do you add to that? How do you think, what kind of themes and situations have you been able to explore?
Well, talking about relationships, I've given Andy a very nice brother that he really gets along with, and they look a lot alike, so they can kind of pass if they try hard enough. And so I have fun with that element. But I've also given Rachel a very nice cousin who comes to be sort of an aide to Andy, you know. So even though my characters don't usually have very successful love interests, they do have a love of family, which is really important. And those people are big supports to them. So that's kind of helpful.
Fantastic. Grace, you mentioned that Laura gathers people around her to be part of her family. What kind of themes and situations have you been able to explore by using that aspect of family and support?
Well, Laura's come to realize that she's not alone because she has these friends, you know, other people's families that have kind of adopted her. I also, in my story arc, has her exploring what happened to her father who disappeared from her life. So you get a little snippet of that with each book. And so the book that I'm working on now, my third book, will explore what happened to that father and, kind of give her some satisfaction in life as to, that mystery. So there's lots you can do with members of that family. Her best friend, Nita Martino, is just a zany person. And that's another element that, I've been able to bring out, especially in a cozy mystery, is the humor. I find that, when I started writing that, I'd write something and think, well, where did that come from? I'm not seeing myself as a particularly humorous person, but the humor comes out. And by having other characters, even though your main character may not be terribly humorous, you can bring humor in through these other characters and extended family members, and they are able to make a situation more humorous. It's a murder mystery, so you never want to poke fun at the victim or anything like that. But being able to interject a lot of humor gives some relief to the reader. You're discussing a very painful situation, the death of someone, but by having this humor in it, it gives a little bit of comic relief for your reader. And I find that my readers, of all two books, have said that they really enjoy the humor, but by having extended family members, they can bring that humor into the story.
Julie, you mentioned that your character was just kind of all out there. Does humor that you find allow you to explore themes and situations, and her attitude in being so open?
So Lily Jane is her family has been part of Goosebush, Massachusetts, which is on the South Shore of Massachusetts, for years. And she has a big house. She made a lot of money in her career, so she's able to build the house back up again and do different things. I find writing humor specifically really difficult. But what I do is, when I wrote this series, I really wanted Lily to be part of a found family. So she doesn't have children of her own, but she's got her late husband's graduate assistant who lives with her. And they're 40 years in difference in age, but they're dear friends. And, Ernie, who owns the hardware store, who also lost his husband, has sort of helped Lily through her grief. and then Tamara is her best friend since she was 3. And, you know, so that community kind of keeps everyone together. That's the kernel of the Garden Squad. And I think some things are funny. I mean, you know, but I don't, you know, Lily drives around in the summer in her cotton A-line dresses and on a Vespa, and wears, you know, bicycle shorts underneath so she doesn't shock anyone. But I don't necessarily, I think I'm funny and I might have humor in it, but I don't do it on purpose. I marvel at people who can.
Daphne, SC, I love what you mentioned about that in seeking ancestry, that is a way of bringing family in that people can connect with. What kind of themes and situations have you been able to explore?
Oh, you know, so much from understanding that certain traits run in families, and to understanding how different you are from your family as well. And it's been really interesting in seeing that or writing about how the characters and their love for their families affects their way of doing things, and affects their thoughts and the way that they think of a situation and whatnot. So that's been really interesting to write about. And I agree with Grace and Julie as well, that I also bring in friends, love of friends and everything, with Lucy's 2 best friends that she also works with. Lucy's family does not live in Austin, where my books are set. But so she has sort of a found family in and of itself, even though she's got a huge family, they're just not in Austin. And so I've brought in a lot of that. And then the genealogy, there's just, she lives and breathes family, and Lucy loves it. And I do too. So it's been great to write about.
Fantastic. Camille, what themes and situations have you been able to explore over your 5 series?
Well, you know, this has been amazing, because I just, from listening to everyone, I figured out what I did over these series. For example, you know, the autobiography that GR brought up first, and then Faye's idea of just too much sharing going on. And I realized that in my first series it was me, you know, a retired physicist with a mother who didn't like her, and just, it was me, you know. And so my 5th series, the woman who owns a diner in Alaska, she has a mother who calls her sweetie and sends her postcards when she's away, and worries about her, you know, and just expresses, I love you, ends the phone call with, I love you, things that I never got. And I, you know, put into my first book, where the Gloria, my first periodic table character, has a mother like mine, really. And now I've given myself, or my character, this great mother. And I really didn't realize it until I kind of put everyone's stories here together about family interactions and autobiography and humor. Because once you put it on paper, at least for me, I realized I don't want to be depressed about this. You know, I don't want to be resentful or angry. So I have distance, and I can make it humorous in a way, or at least, you know, even though it's not a quote funny book, there is humor, as Julie says, it just comes out kind of naturally as a result of all this. So thank you all for helping me with this idea.
And then if I may, Jess Lowry has a really good book about how she's doing this. I think it's called Rewriting Your Life. Yeah. And it's about, you know, not actually going into writing memoir, because that could be painful. I can't do memoir. I mean, I tried it once, and my husband had to like scrape me up off the floor. But I can do it in fiction, right? I can explore, I can reinvent, I can reimagine circumstances that happened when I was younger. So that's quite interesting.
What's the name of the book, Faye?
Jess Lowry, and I think you're right, it's Reinventing Your Life.
I think it's Rewriting Your Life.
Sorry.
Yeah, and it's using those elements that you may be, you know, you come at it like Dickinson says at a slant. You know, you tell the truth, but at a slant. But it's like you use that in your fiction, and it just punches it up, right? It just makes it more intense. So yeah.
Yeah, thanks.
I read somewhere recently that you reach the point where you no longer are writing autobiographically at your 7th or 8th book.
Yeah.
I think you've run out of your own stories at that point. So
Oh.
purely fiction by the time you get to your 7th or 8th book.
Oh,
My
no.
mother, Laura Bishop's mother in my book is so awful that I almost felt I should have written a preface that said, my own mother was wonderful. And yeah, this character is not based on my mother.
Interesting.
Well, it's interesting that at least in fiction, you can have a world that you can live in for a little while if you don't have to live in the whole time. Camille and all of you have protagonists who have very strong professions play an important part in your books. Camille, you have a broad spectrum of professions. How did you determine to bring up these professions and put your antagonist, your protagonist in each of these situations? And what part do professions play in the writing of your books?
Well, you know, I always think that I'm turning my life into series because I've done every one of these things.
Wow.
You know, and also, you know, what Grace says about 7 or 8 books, well, it took me like 28 books to really relax about it. So if you do it by book 7 or book 2 or even book 1, congratulations. So, but I started out with the periodic table series, just inspired by Sue Grafton. I remember thinking, well, she only has 26 letters. You know, I got 118 elements. I can really go a long way with this. So I so far, probably the Alaska book is the one that's least me, in that I've never owned a diner, although I've been a waitress. So there's that also. So I like to think of myself as just not creative. I just have to have done it and been it in the situation, and then I can create fiction around it. But pretty much I'm still working on this, what I've done myself. I'm not sure that's the exact question you had.
No, that's very interesting.
That's how it's worked for me. Yeah.
Julie, how about you? You have 3 different series, all very different types of protagonists.
I do. I mean, my first series was about a clockmaker, and I had no idea about that. But I have a friend who I was telling her, because it was very exciting to get the opportunity to write that book. And she said, you know, my husband's a clockmaker. So that was gold, because I could talk to him. And also there's a wonderful American Clock and Watch Museum in Bristol, Connecticut. So, you know, that was helpful. My second series was about a woman who is an ex-cop who's now running a theater company. And I have worked in theater on that side of it for, you know, over 30 years. So I brought a lot of that. And that series was actually the first book I wrote, was A Christmas Carol, that I was trying to get out there, and it wasn't the first book published. But that is when we talk about autobiography. She's a lot of me in that book, for sure. People, you know, if you're going to look at any of these protagonists that I write, she is the most like me. And then Lily in the third, in my most recent series, is a retired person who worked in finances. And I'm very general about that because I have no idea. I just wanted to pick something where you can make a lot of money. But she is a master gardener and loves gardening. And that's her focus and her pursuit. That's how she starts to solve. Her friends go out in the middle of the night because she's sick of the red tape in town hall not getting these gardening issues solved. So they just go out in the middle of the night and they start like planting things or weeding things or fixing things garden wise, and then they start solving crimes together. So I think we do bring a lot of ourselves, and it is interesting. I'm working on my 10th book now, and it did take me a while to get me and my stuff out of there. And I feel like the Garden Squad is a new world to me that I'm fully exploring, and certainly elements and names of people I know, but the characters have very little to do with me, which is kind of fun.
Yeah. Now, DR, you've written both memoir and fictionalized, but how do you break out what you've experienced with how you want to fictionalize it?
Well, now that it's just like what Carol said, now that I'm thinking about it and listening to what everybody said, when I wrote my first mystery, we were playing 5 or 6 nights a week.
Wow.
And now I don't get to play very much. In fact, I haven't played since February because of, everything going on. But now I only get to play usually, I don't know, 2-3 times a month if I'm lucky. So things have really changed. And now I have more writing time, so that's good. But, just I was always in this mariachi world, and I got very used to that atmosphere. And I think it's a very particular atmosphere, but it is really fascinating. So I play violin. So what we would do, we would walk out among the crowd. And, I'll tell you the truth, I don't look Mexican. I'm not. I'm a quarter Italian, very important. And so people especially would put down their guard when I was around, and they would speak in Spanish. And sometimes they would say things like, y esa gringa que está haciendo aquí. They would assume I didn't understand them. And then I would be able to either whip around and say something snarky, or I would just get to overhear, something very, very interesting. And that's why when I'd been wanting to write a mystery, it just seemed like the perfect setting, this mariachi restaurant, because what happens is that, you have a bunch of regulars who come in a lot. So actually what Andy notices is that this regular who's come in a lot is, flirting with the boss's wife. And that's how he gets started in his career of meddling. So the mariachi restaurant was just a great setting for mystery, intrigue. And I know that for a lot of the years that we had that restaurant, there was a lot of drug dealing in the bathroom.
Wow. So many things to discover.
Right.
Now, Grace, your heroine similarly has a unique position in which to observe what's going on.
Well, when I started out to write a cozy mystery, I was told, you need a business or an interest for your main character. And I thought, well, what am I going to bring to this that hasn't already been done over and over and over again? Nothing unique like a clock. And I thought, well, what do I know? And I discovered that I spent a lot of time watching HGTV home staging and decorating shows, to the point where I had gotten so good at it that I was helping friends stage their homes. Go in with, equipment to rearrange the furniture and take down the drapes and everything. So I thought that's going to be, my main character. But I knew that, I had no skill in this other than what I had learned. And, it's amazing how much you do learn watching, these TV shows. So I contacted a home staging, teaching and certifying organization in Texas, Staging Studios, and asked them if, I could be on their Facebook page and follow them. And they were so thrilled to have a murder mystery character who was a home stager that they even read my book and gave me feedback. I mean, that was so great. But, she gets to go into homes, and in the first book, when a body falls from a laundry chute and lands at her feet, she discovers that removing flowered wallpaper was the least of her home staging duties. So by going into people's homes, she becomes aware of what's going on. It was fun because it hasn't been overdone, and I've learned a lot from it. And you just have to put her in unusual situations, because you can't have the homeowner of every house that she stages murdered. So you got to come up with something different.
Stephanie, what does your protagonist learn from looking into people's backgrounds? And I know in particular in your first book, maybe there were some people that were unexpected to be ancestors. How does your protagonist profession influence what you explore?
Well, I grew up hearing about my ancestry. Going back to my great-grandfather, we've had amateur genealogists, and so it's always been a part of my life. And same thing, like what Grace was saying, when I was thinking about what kind of a character, what she could do for a living and everything, I thought, oh, genealogy, because you can have a murder in the past and a murder in the present, and how are they connected, in a good puzzle. And you know, just looking back and through you know, genealogy, any records that you look through, I mean, it's like a puzzle in and of itself, and there's so much interesting stuff in there, and you really go down a rabbit hole. And also, you know, speaking back to sort of the love element, you know, the whole do what you love and you never work a day in your life. I think that's how Lucy feels, that she loves her job so much and that it just makes her so happy. And so, you know, just, and then being able to go back and research it. She calls herself the ancestry detective for a reason, because she finds that going back and researching family histories is like following a detective's trail. And she's, you know, so it just, I don't know, it just works out for her, and she just loves it. And I love writing about it too. It's just so much fun. So, and because it's part of my past as well, then it just makes it even more fun. So I really love it.
Fabulous. Rena, how about you? How do professions influence your writing?
Stephanie was just saying.
A little louder.
Sorry, I even volume up on my computer. It's not helping.
That's good. That's good.
We mine our own backgrounds, our own professions, but we also mine the lives of everybody around us. So in trying to have a profession for this woman who had been a socialite and suddenly had no money and had to support herself, I started asking the younger relatives in the family what they did, what they would do, how they could quickly turn their talents into something else. So starting a website company with 2 kids who are students and they're doing projects for their classes, kind of that pulled her into that, and then she could learn sort of on their backs. And I have a nephew-in-law who designed my website, so I could suck out part of his life and use that. My
Fantastic.
son, there's too much of him in my book, so.
Faye, how about you? How do professions influence what you've written?
Usually the professions are part of the plot. It's usually, in my new series, it's mostly, she's a detective, so that plays a part. The sequel I'm writing to that series, though, because I love all things law enforcement, and I don't know how I got that obsession, but I have like a cleaner, a crime scene cleaner in there, and then, you know, that kind of stuff. So I just kind of explore the different professions around law enforcement. That's how. In my other books, I think my first book, she was a lawyer, and there was some family stuff that she had to go back home for. And the other books, I had a doctor. So I'm just kind of, I guess I'm doing all the TV shows, you know, like medical lawyer and now cop. But yeah, but and I'm branching out into like the, you know, the things that surround the professions that surround the detectives and everything. So,
you know, it is so fascinating. We had a fingerprint expert come to talk to our Sisters in Crime group, and there are such specialties out there now. You really can. That's a good way to approach it. Wonderful. Mm-hmm. We have had one question come in from our audience, and the question is, for those that have romance, how far do you take the couples in their relationship? Who might like to start with this?
Well,
Stephanie.
Whoever. Well, I knew where I wanted the relationship to go from the beginning, and I won't give that away, but I really liked the progression of it, and the ups and downs and ins and outs and whatnot. And so I've enjoyed taking it and developing the romantic element in my cozy mystery. And where it goes eventually, we'll have to see how many books that come out of my series and whatnot, but I really enjoy it. I think that it's fun. I think it's an integral part of her life. And I hear from readers too that they love that character of Ben Turner, the FBI agent. So I enjoy writing it too. And so I hope that it keeps going.
Me too. DR.
So I guess I wish my life, I wish I had as much fun as Andy. Here's the situation. All these years playing mariachi, I was usually in a group with about 5 guys. They talk about 2 things, music and sex. It's just, they're Mexican or Mexican American. It's sex, sex, sex. That's all they talk about. And of course the songs are, a lot of, so anyway, I guess it just seemed normal to me that there would be, sex, but I don't like writing it and I don't like reading it on the page. So, there's a lot that there's a lot that I leave out, because obviously most of us by now, we can, use our imagination to figure out what happened after they got into the bedroom. But anyway, I like Camille's idea of that slow burn. I think that really works too. And I think that's very effective, but Andy's too impatient for that. He has to grab what he can get.
Anyone else who'd like to talk about how far that they go with relationships?
Well, I'll add something. Writing cozies, you have a contract with the reader that you're not going to have sex, violence, or bad language. So, I'm not going to really take it beyond maybe a raised eyebrow because one, I don't want to write about it. I don't want to be seeing my neighbors on the street and have them go, oh, okay, yeah, that's what you wrote about. Yeah. So I don't have to go there in a cozy series, thankfully.
Yeah. Very good.
Yeah.
And anyone else who'd like to respond to how far?
Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, now I don't. I mean, it has to be on the storyboard. When I was writing romantic suspense, I mean, the most embarrassing. I don't know if you guys, any other writers out there, experience this. With my dad, whom we have a really good relationship. I love my dad now, I have to say. But when he called me up and wanted to kind of read to me what I wrote and tell me what I wrote, like I didn't write it in the first place. But it was so funny. One time he did it with a sex scene. I was like, are you kidding me? But it was, and then he goes, that was very classy. I mean, just a very classy how you did it. And then he just started reading, like, Dad, no. So now that's what I watch. But I want my dad reading this back to me, and that's my barometer.
I love that. I love that.
That's unique, I think, Faye, that you would have that relationship with your dad. That's amazing. And I like the idea too of just, for me, fade to black, is the kind of rule in a cozy. And so there's, as I said in the beginning, there's a lot of flirting that goes on. And I don't have any commitment until I'm ready to end the series, and then they get married. So the last in the series is like Matrimony in Miniature. One of my series, the character is a miniaturist, and she meets a man who's a crafter. They're both widows, so they get together. So this is a sample of a miniature. It's a little table with a ice cream sundae on it, if you can see that.
Yeah.
So I have them all around me, obviously, but usually it's something like that where they meet their soulmate in a way, and are able to do a hobby together or to do something together. And so the antagonism that might be there in the beginning sort of fades, where they find this other common thing that they love, and then seal the deal at the end.
Well, we've got about 7 minutes left, and I want to go around and let each person mention what they're working on now, but also if you have a bit of advice for writers at any stage. So a 2-pronged question. What's your current work in progress? What bit of advice would you give to writers? Grace, I'm going to start with you.
Okay. I'm working on book 3 in the Laura Bishop. It's right now a tentative title of Upstaged by Murder. As far as advice to give, I would just say don't give up. The thing that differentiates someone who's published and someone who hasn't finished a book is the fact that they're just, you have to be too stubborn to give up. Like I said, I wrote 38 versions of my first book, and I was learning as I went, but just keep at it. If you do, you'll get there.
Absolutely. Rena, what's your work in progress and what's your bit of advice?
My working title is Virtual Murder, and my granddaughter is looking at colleges, but she can't go travel to them. So she's looking at the various tours universities and colleges have put out. And apparently they're pretty much universally dreadful. So that was the starting point for this, this book. And because we're living life virtually, a lot of those feelings that we have and Zoom meetings and things like this are going into the book so that I can express my frustration with this on paper. And actually that plays into what I would tell new authors too. Every word that comes out of your pen onto your paper is not golden. Play with it, experiment, edit it, exercise with it, and eventually the words will be beautiful and hang together. But you have to experiment, you have to practice, 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 practice.
I love that, exercise with it. Faye, what's your work in progress and your advice?
My work in progress is A Killing Rain. It's with the editor right now. It's a sequel to my Killing series with Raven Burns. My advice is I can build on, I echo what everyone says, but don't give up. Definitely don't give up. It's never too late. And the other thing is write what you want to read. I think that's really important.
Stephanie?
I just turned in my third ancestry detective book to my editor, and it is titled Fatal Family Ties, and it has an art and a Civil War theme to it. So that was really fun to research and write about. And the advice that I would give to writers is if you don't yet have an agent and you're not yet published, invest in a good editor. You can write it off on your taxes, check with your CPA, but invest in a proper editor and get your book edited and get used to editing and revising and being edited, because it's going to be a big part of your life. And I actually love that part of writing, of being able to take something and make it better. So that's what my advice is, invest in a good editor.
DR?
I'm working, what am I working on? I'm working on a book called Brotherly Love. So as I've said, Andy has a good relationship with his brother. So that's central in this book, but his sister-in-law and his brother has a terrible relationship with her brother. So I've got, contrasting sibling relationships. So that should be really fun. For advice, I've even though I'd read his books before, I finally went to a workshop with Don Moss. He used to be in New York, now he's in like the West Coast. But he does writers' workshops, and I've found them very, very helpful, because I have so many things wrong. And in fact, one of the manuscripts that I took to him, he said, this isn't going to work. I would start over. It's like, oh, darn, hate for somebody like that to be right. But he's been very, very helpful for me. Don, M-A-A-S-S.
Thank you. All right. Julia?
I am about to start book 5 in the Garden Squad series. Right now it's tentatively titled The Plot Thickets, but I don't think that will last because my titles never last. And I think all of the advice that people have been giving are great. I just want to underscore what Rena said about, it's your first draft's not going to be great, and that's okay. That's part of the process. But my best piece of advice for folks is to find your community. Sisters in Crime is and was that for me. I'm going to be writing book 5 as part of NaNoWriMo this year, and Sisters in Crime has an event where we're going to be supporting people with Facebook Lives and Twitter, Twitter sprints and different things like that. But finding people who understand what you're going through and support you on the way makes all the difference. I blog with 5 women, the Wicked Authors, and we're not just blog mates, we're friends who understand the journey. And so finding people who really understand the journey and want, can both cheer you on, give you advice, give you tough love when you need it is so critical. So, NaNoWriMo, I hope I see some other people struggling to get that first draft done in November.
Camille?
Yeah, I was trying to remember. Oh, sorry.
No, your work in progress and your advice.
Yeah, I'm working on the third book in the new series. I just got my edits back from Penguin. And I was trying to remember who said all writing is rewriting. And if I were smarter about my computer, I would have looked for it online before I had to talk. But I was afraid I'd lose you all if I went to another window. So I didn't do it. And I love the idea of the community. I don't think I could, I had the idea as a physicist, you work with a team. You don't work out of your garage. You have a big laser, you work with a big team. And I thought I'll never be able to be a writer because you have to be in a loft by yourself, poor, and just, and so, and then I found the community and it's just amazing. My beta readers. And if I have one more minute, we have this besides the NaNoWriMo type groups that I love also. We have a meeting, 2 Zoom meetings a day with other writers. And all we do is check in, say hi, what are you going to do this hour? And then we mute ourselves and write for an hour. And then check back in to say we did it or not. And that motivation for me, on days, especially now being sheltered and all, without that, someone is waiting for me to, do this, then I do it anyway.
And I want to thank everybody. June has given me the sign that we have no more minutes. I am so sorry. It seems that it went so quickly, but I know June will put up all of your Facebook, all of your websites. Thank you to all of you. Please, to all the participants, let me highly recommend the books of all of these wonderful authors. Please take a look at their websites and read their books. And thank you for being with us today. And thank you, June Gillum, for being our host. Thank you all.
Thank you, Paula.
Thank you, guys. Nice to see you, Julie, Camille. Bye. Nice to meet everybody.